archive events. Hold on, we'll give folks a moment. Just wait a little bit. Okay. I'm sure people will join as they find us. Welcome. Again, welcome. This is the third in our series on resiliency after brain injury. I'm Greg Ayotte, Director of Consumer Services for the Brain Injury Association of America, and I'm here today with Kelly and Carol talking about purpose after brain injury. I thought we'd just let you guys introduce yourselves just briefly. Start with Carol.
Sure, thank you. My name is Carol Starr, and I have been a brain injury survivor for 24 years now. I sustained my brain injury from a car accident back in 1999. And like so many of us, it changed my life forever. I had been a teacher before, I was a musician before, and I was not able to go back to any of those things. So I had to reinvent myself. I had to find a new purpose. So this is a really important topic, I think, for me personally, but also for hopefully some of those of you who are listening, because reinventing ourselves, finding a new way to be in the world is such an important part of the brain injury journey.
Yes, definitely. Thank you. And Kelly?
I'm Kelly Lang. I am in Northern Virginia, and I am both a caregiver to a daughter who was injured in the same accident I was in 2001. So we've been advocating for almost 22 years. So, and Carol's right, after brain injury, there's a lot you go through, but you have to find your new purpose, your new avenue of how you're going to move your life forward. And how you want to do that is all individual, but we will talk a little bit about how we did it, mistakes we made along the way, and try to give some inspiration at the same time.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you both for joining, coming, and be willing to kind of share a little bit about your experiences. So I guess we'll jump right in. We'll start with Kelly. So why is having a sense of purpose after brain injury important?
For me, it was important because my whole life had been turned upside down, and I felt like I needed to do something with this experience. Now, I wasn't in the experience for very long, but I still felt that need. And so on the first anniversary of our accident, it was the first time I did a public speaking event, speaking to EMT emergency medical technicians, and it was a refresher course. And there was a couple of trauma survivors who got up and told their stories, and I felt empowered by that. And I thought, maybe this is something I should do, is start working with others, and within a platform that I didn't have to manage at the time, but could come as I could, and try to give some inspiration. Like I said, we were only a year in, and there was still going to be a lot of peaks and valleys along the way, but I could share all those with a group who understood and who could dial back in their own experience and realize this is why I do what I do, and so that these families can move forward. That's why they do this life-saving work, and it kind of became my mission.
And Carol?
Yeah, like Kelly said, our lives change so dramatically after brain injury, and those first few months or years are spent, relearning, basic life skills, learning strategies for how to manage the everyday stuff. But then what? Then once we kind of know how to live, what do we do? If, like, for many of us, we can't go back to the way life used to be. We can't go back to our maybe jobs or hobbies or the things that used to give us a sense of purpose, a sense of meaning. But that's some of what makes life rich, is having that sense of purpose, that reason to get out of bed in the morning, something that says, this is something I can do. This is something that gives my life that sense of I have a purpose. I have a reason for being here. There's a quote from Helen Keller that I really like, and I put it on my computer screen today. And she said that when one door of happiness closes, another opens. But often we look so long at the closed door that we don't see the one which has been opened before us. And I think that's so true for brain injury, that finding purpose is about first acknowledging that closed door, because we all know brain injury, it closes doors for us. It closes doors on our old life. But then it's about figuring out, well, where is that open door or window or whatever it is, because it's there. It might be different than it was before, but finding it means stepping into that new life. And it means the possibility of something that can be good again, different, but good again.
Thank you. That's it's never an easy
No.
process or task or and we obviously get a lot of calls around this, which one of the reasons why we wanted to do this was it's not a one time thing. Like it's not I've got a brain injury, I'm going to do this now. It's a process of you get definitely kind of acknowledging the closing of one door, but just I always pictured it as there's multiple other, like what's the other path I'm going to take? What's the other choice I might make?
Yeah, it's not a box that you just like you check one day. Purpose, check. It doesn't work like that. It's a process, and I know at least for me, it was a long process. It was a multi-stage, a years long process to figure out.
Well, let's talk about that. So once you figured out the why, tell me a little bit about the how. How did you go about figuring out what that next door might look like?
Well,
let's go.
All right. So mine started here with this paint by number. I do show and tell. I could not have told you that this was the beginning of purpose for me. That I tried for years to go back to my old life as a teacher, as a musician, and every time I tried, I failed. And what I had to do was I had to try something completely different. I had to do something that honored the new person that I am now. And there was this little voice in me that it took me a while to begin to hear it, that was saying, make something. That, old Carol, she was not a crafty person. She was not somebody who wanted to do things with her hands. But new Carol was. And new Carol wanted to try something like this. When I started doing this, I could do this for 15 minutes at a time. Then I had to take a nap. But I discovered that I liked doing crafts, that I could be successful at doing crafts. I started to make jewelry. This is one of the pieces that I made along the way. Then I started to teach other brain injury survivors how to make crafts. And I discovered that I could still be a teacher. It's very different than the way that I used to teach, but that teaching could still be part of my purpose. I just had to do it differently. I got asked to participate in a workshop at the Maine Brain Injury Conference about creativity. And while I was there, I got to do a 5-minute speech about my crafts, about what they meant to me. And I was so nervous. I was like shaking behind that podium. But I had this feeling of I'm home. This is what I want to do. And I knew that I wanted to do more speaking about brain injury. And at that same conference, the woman who would later become my mentor, she was the keynote speaker. And I had no idea at that point that brain injury survivors could give big speeches, could give keynotes. She was also an author, that brain injury survivors could write books. And she gave me this path of look what's possible. I had no idea at the time how in the world could I do any of those things, because my endurance at the time was about an hour long. But it gave me a model. It gave me something to work towards. And it was that one tiny step at a time. But having a goal in mind. I want to speak more about brain injury. I want to use my, just like Kelly, I want to use my experience to help others. It gave me that sense that everything I'd been through, it wasn't just to ruin my life, that I could help somebody else. And that meant a lot to me in terms of finding a sense of purpose, finding meaning in this experience.
So for me, I went through a period, who was I? What was I here for? What am I doing? What can I do? All those old roles were gone. But I was still a caretaker. I was still a mom. I was still trying to rebuild my identity. And so I went through a period of, it's not what I do, it's how do I define myself and how do I feel I can most make a difference. And that, like I said, started with public speaking. There was a few bombs, there was a few failures along the way, and that will happen. And and grieve those losses, but then get yourself back up. Not that, if you think you can, because I don't believe in that motto, but just keep trying, maybe try it a little differently. I mean, I joined a board very early on and it was not a good fit. I wasn't ready. I just don't even think the group dynamics worked. So I stepped back and just tried to keep rebuilding things. And I truly believe that everyone has a story and everyone has a story, and we can learn something from everyone's story. None of our stories are the same, just as no two brain injuries are alike and no two recoveries are alike. But we can take a little piece of everyone's story and learn something or take some inspiration from it and hopefully share that amongst the wider community so we can all build each other up, and be a huge support network to everyone.
And I think you bring up such an important point, Kelly, about that, trying lots of things. That, like when I was doing crafts, I tried lots of crafts. Some of them I liked, some of them I didn't like. I tried knitting. There were lots of very big holes in the things that I ended up knitting that I didn't quite know how to fix. So I kept on going. My knitting phase did not last very long. But it's not so much, the importance is just to try things. I think of like brain injuries, it's like we're growing up all over again. And when we're kids, we try a lot of activities and we see what sticks.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the same thing. And Kelly and I have found purpose in sharing our story, but that's not the only way to find purpose. People can do that in any number of ways, through time with family and friends, through gardening, through being outside, through spiritual activities, through it's whatever gives somebody that sense of meaning. That's what I think, to me, that's what purpose is all about, is knowing that we are more than just professional patients. I know that early in my journey, I just felt like I was a professional patient. I just went from doctor's visits to rehab visit, and that's what my life felt like, this continual cycle. And I still see a lot of medical professionals. That's life as a brain injury survivor. But I have this pocket of purpose. Ooh, alliteration. That gives me that sense of a bigger plan, that helps me to feel like there is something more to life than just the medical appointments.
So you both touched on something I think is important to stress. And it's certainly something I think that folks can struggle with. It's this idea of trying many things to find the things that start to click with you. I think sometimes folks get frustrated. They think, "Oh, I'm going to speak about brain injury," and they do it, but it just doesn't work. It's not their thing. They never get comfortable doing it. They don't feel like this is what they want to do, but they might be great at running a support group.
Mm-hmm.
Which is, same process, very different dynamic. But so it's the idea of trying to figure out, if it doesn't work, what did work and what didn't work. What did I feel comfortable with? What is like, I don't like this at all. And so it's definitely a process of figuring out from the trials, what are the things that you can take from that And I would imagine, so maybe you guys can talk to this. This is my off the cuff question.
We knew we were going to get one.
It made me think about, because there's this balance of, if you try it and you're not good at it, doesn't mean don't ever try it again, right? It might mean I'm not ready for that. Like Kelly had talked about her experience on the board early on, where you were not in a place, but I know that you've been on board since then. And so you're in a much better place. So it's not that I just don't want people to walk away like, if I try it, it doesn't work, I just cross it off the list. Like, I don't know if you guys want to speak to that part of it, the dealing with the challenges, the trials, how to piece that together.
And that's a great point, Greg. And it is. I mean, after that one experience, I thought, I'm not going to be on a board again. And it was a few years later, but not a huge amount of time. And I started to rethink, what can I do with what I have learned, and what that can fit into the parameter of my life. And that, there's always the part when you're recovering is you don't want to take on too much, because that every step forward, you might take 2 steps backwards. And, the fatigue was a huge issue for me. And so if I bit off more than I could chew, I was going to pay the price. And so was my family. So I had to, I always say, like, baby steps, or, chunk it, you take it in chunks and just take small things, and to the point where I felt like, you know what, maybe I can serve on a board. Maybe that wasn't the right board. Maybe, what they were doing and how they were meeting didn't fit with what I could do and what I couldn't do, because I could choose where I would be. And I talk about the first time I sat on the Brain Injury Association of Virginia's board. It was terrifying, absolutely terrifying. And I cried the night before I went. I was terrified, so scared that I was going to not understand anything. And I went and realized I don't have to know everything 120%. I could pick the areas that I knew more about. And those were the areas I would focus on. And the other areas I would listen and try to understand, but I could also sit back and kind of turn my brain off for a few minutes, and, or walk outside the room and take a 5-minute break, and just try to do it slowly. And slowly it got much easier over time. I was adding in a drive too, which was also a new step for me, of a longer distance drive in one day. So I think to always remember there's parts of it that probably work, and just keep trying to tweak it a little bit. Maybe don't become the chairperson, or don't become, just go and observe a meeting. To me, that's the most you can do, and just watch the dynamics and see how they operate, and see if maybe there is a little room. Join a committee rather than take on a bigger role. And hopefully over time you'll work up to it, because we can work up to things. It may never ever go away. I mean, I still deal with fatigue, but I can manage it better now than I ever did.
Those are great suggestions.
Yeah, and it's interesting, because I just this summer I had an experience like what you're talking about, Greg, where something I tried and it didn't go so well. It wasn't related to brain injury. Actually, I do genealogy. I've been doing it for years, and there was a course that I wanted to take. The first course that I have taken since my brain injury. It was an online course. Pieces of it went well, but there were pieces of it that really surprised me at how difficult and how much I struggled brain-wise. And it was humbling to me, because I thought, I am ready for this. I've got this. Look at all that I have done, to date post brain injury. I'm 24 years out. I'm ready for this.
Yeah.
Like, I could do the content, but I couldn't keep up with the pace. That even though it was self-paced, the content changed every week, and I could not keep up brain-wise, with that. And I think the lesson is that I was a little down. I won't lie, a little down about it. Like, does this mean I can't take courses? What does this mean? And I think it's about learning from things, acknowledging the sadness that comes, because there's really, I couldn't do this, and being okay with acknowledging the sadness, but then saying, all right, well, what do I learn? What do I know now about myself that I didn't know before? That, I learned that, I still struggle with trying to be old Carol, like in situations like that, because I tried to be the person I used to be, and I can't be anymore. That I needed different strategies. That, all right, if I was going to try this again, I do things differently, and learning from this. That's all part of the process, and to grow forward.
Those are all very helpful, I think, insights and suggestions for folks. The importance of learning from the trials, learning what worked, what didn't, revisiting things later, or understanding that sometimes you misjudge how easy or hard a task is going to be. Right?
Mm-hmm.
I got this. I've been doing this for so long. I'd be able to do it, and it ends up being something a little different than you picture in your head. And so it's important to realize what is actually in front of you versus what you think is there. You know what I mean? Like the reality versus what your perceptions might be, and being mindful of that, and trying to adjust, try to figure, okay, well, it's not what I thought it was. So what do I want to do about it? How do I want to,
Yes.
how do I want to address it? So given all of those trials and tribulations, if you start to find your groove, how does that, can you speak a little bit about kind of how that impacts you just overall, just as a person, as a survivor, as someone trying to give back? How does that help you day to day? I'm sorry, with Carol. No, Carol.
For me, as I began to have a sense of purpose, first like with the craft and making things and making gifts for people, and then as I moved more into brain injury advocacy and speaking and writing, it gave me a role to play. That particularly, like, I felt like, like I said, like a professional patient, but then I felt like I had something to talk about with other people. That I could talk about, here are the things I'm making, here are the speeches that I'm doing, not just, well, here are the doctors that I visited this month. That I didn't feel so isolated anymore, because when all of my my friends and family, they all have jobs, they have family, they have very different lives than I lead now as a brain injury survivor. That having this sense of purpose, it gave me something to talk about. My life is still different than theirs, but it gave me that feeling like I have something to offer a conversation, and feeling less isolated. It gives me a sense of community. Now as a brain injury, as a speaker and an author, I know people all across the country, that I can reach out to and work with, and I value that so very, very much. Opportunities like this to use my experience to make a difference, and I get to feel like, I was 32 when I had my injury, so I had less than 10 years of a career. So I lost my career very young. So even though I can't work full time or anywhere close to it anymore, I will never be able to do that again. But I feel like I have a career again, even in a very short, bursts of activity followed by long stretches of rest. But it still feels like a career to me. And that means a great deal to me.
Excellent. Kelly?
Yeah, I think it's about finding your passion and what feeds that passion. And I think that by speaking out and meeting other survivors, you start to learn from each other, and you start to build each other up. I mean, Carol and I never would have met had
No.
she's in Maine and I'm in Virginia, had it wouldn't been that we had this common, tragic event that happened in our lives, very different, but it still brought us together, and we were able to work together to help others, to teach others, but then also to help build up other newer survivors and how much they can give to the community. And it's all about building that network, building a community. It's a lot different than a professional network or a professional community, but it enriches our lives. I mean, I feel the same as Carol. I wasn't able to go back to my previous career in human resources, but I was able to build this other work that I feel so passionate about and drives me every single day to do something that helps others understand brain injury and helps to build up other survivors so they too can have that same sense of purpose that yes, their lives have been derailed, but they can, get back up and do something that makes them happy, because really that's all we need is to be happy and healthy. Um, and I hope to continue to encourage others to do that and to try. And if you stumble, you get back up, you reevaluate, maybe rest, and then try again, and see what works for you.
Mhm.
And it might change over time.
Yeah. And I know that when I was, finding my own sense of purpose, how important having a mentor was, having somebody else who had walked this road. And it's such a privilege now that, I am the long-term survivor, being able to be that, for other people, being able to share experience. As survivors, we help each other because, there's nothing there. If you haven't been through this experience, it's hard to understand. And now with technology, we have an opportunity to impact each other, all across the country, which is such a valuable thing.
You guys kind of answered my last question, which was about kind of the tips for folks who are kind of just starting out on this path. I think you kind of offered some great suggestions. We did have one comment, one question in the comments that has been passed along that I think could be helpful to address. Someone had asked about, how do you reconcile missing the old you? How do you come to terms with that and try to start to move forward?
Well, you're going to have those moments of, I call it brain injury grief, where you're going to be sitting somewhere and you're going to look around. And it happened to me very recently, sitting in a room full of almost all professionals in the brain injury field, and thought, wow. And this wave of grief came over me. But it also, I think you have to sit through it. You can't try to shove it away because it's just going to hang there. Just like any type of grief, you have to go through it in order to get out on the other side. And so in realizing that, okay, yes, I've lost a lot, but I've also gained a huge thing. I mean, I would never, if you had asked me 22 years ago if I would be public speaking on brain injury, I'd be like, what's brain injury, first of all? And then second of all, absolutely not.
Mm-hmm.
And, I'm not the same person I was in 2001. And that's a good thing. I think I've grown in a lot of ways that I might not necessarily have grown. And I've become more courageous and adventurous and more willing to try things than maybe I would have been otherwise. Obviously I have no crystal ball. I don't know what was in there for me before, but also to show others that you can keep trying and keep moving forward, and maybe even be a better person than you thought you were before. And even if you're not better, at least you have a more simple life, or a more enriched life, I should say.
And I think that for me, in terms of reconciling the grief, I had to turn away from all of the things that I used to do, because the more that I tried to go back to those activities that I could no longer do, the more grief that I felt. That I need, like, when I did this, I'd never done this kind of thing before. So it didn't trigger grief because I had nothing to compare it to. Because early on, I did so much comparing to, well, old Carol could do it this way. Old Carol could do this so much better. But when I tried things that old Carol had never done, then there wasn't that comparison. And the more that I built up a repertoire of things that old Carol had never done, the stronger I got. And the stronger I got, the less the grief did me in. Do I still feel it sometimes? Yes, I do. that it never completely goes away, because we've all had a tremendous loss. And like Kelly said, like she had an episode recently, and it's just part of the gig, that things will happen and it will remind us of what used to be. But the difference is as you kind of move through things, is they happen, but it's like a hole. At first, the grief is this gaping hole that something reminds you, you fall in and you are stuck there for hours, for days, for months. You just can't get yourself out. But eventually you learn, oh, wait a minute, I know how to get myself out. I focus on what I can do. The more I focus on what I can't do, the worse the grief is. Focus on what I can do. That's how I climb out of the hole. And eventually the hole is still there, but it gets smaller. And yeah, you trip over it, but you keep moving forward. And it's not a quick thing.
Yeah.
It's a lifelong process.
Yeah.
I mean, I thought it was going to break me. I didn't think it was doable. Nobody was more surprised than me, when I got to this place. But it is possible. And finding things that give you a sense of purpose is part of that process.
Yeah, there's a lot to be said for, as you're trying to new things, not necessarily know where you're going. You know what I mean?
Yes.
I'm going
Yes.
to do this. Like, I just know that this feels like a better match for me. Let's go see where this goes.
Yes,
And just being open to figuring out what opportunities that brings, rather than
definitely.
here's my new goal. I'm doing this. Certainly, I've seen that happen, and that can kind of create its own challenges, right? If it's the wrong path and wrong door, you're back to kind of the big hole of grief and just trying to figure, oh man, I feel so lost. So just that one small thing and seeing where things lead
Mhm.
can make a big difference. Well, I thank you both for coming and sharing. I think this is an extremely important topic and issue for folks who are watching us live. Thank you for joining. If you are watching us as a recorded, thanks for watching. Share this with others. Let other folks know about it. As always, if people have questions, looking for resources in their area, they're more than welcome to contact us at the Brain Injury Association of America. Carol and Kelly, thank you both for joining us today, and thank you for sharing.
Thanks for having us.
Thank
Great.
you.
Take care, everybody.